Viewers around the world, you're watching Telebeltop on Roku. My name is Elich Dorelas. I'm your host for today for the interview. Road to the primary election in Boston. This year, it's going to be big in Boston. We have the primary going on September 14, and we have the election in November. Today, it's a pleasure to have with us City Council at Large, Mr. Michael Flaherty. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you.
It's great to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you for coming here. We appreciate that. You've been in office for so many years. Tell me, how do you feel to run again?
Sure. Obviously, I was elected and sworn in 2000, so I'm excited to be in this race. I love Boston. I love helping people, and you can do a lot of good for people and for communities as a member of the Boston City Council, particularly at large, because I get to go across the whole city. So, exciting race because obviously we have a race for mayor in Boston, which is get the sort of political juices flowing. There's going to be a couple openings at large. There's also some district openings by virtue of the fact that 4 members of the council are running for mayor. So there is a lot of excitement in the air as we're coming out of the pandemic. Things are starting to kind of get back to normal. We hope that will continue, knock on wood. But yeah, no, this is an exciting time, particularly for our city. Talking about new administration, new members of the council. But with at least 5 new members of the council going to be elected with the new administration, I argue that experience, that institutional knowledge, mentorship, leadership, those qualities are qualities that I bring to the table and are going to be critical as we're bringing in a new administration and a lot of new members of the council. So I'm excited.
Great. From reading your bio, I saw you got inspired by your father.
Yes.
You were the representative. Tell me the history behind that.
Yeah, sure. Well, he obviously was a state representative, did 12 terms, and it was just being a young kid, either answering the phone at the house, old school. We didn't have cell phones, texting. The phone rang at the house, and it could be someone that their heat went out, or that there was some type of emergency in their home, or they were looking for employment or housing, and that's my father. He would jump right on that. So oftentimes we would get the constituent request at the home. My father always put the home phone number in the phone book because he felt that he worked for his constituents. He worked for the people who elected him. So oftentimes if he wasn't in, I'd be taking notes. Whoever the person was, what the issue was. And then I would in turn either call into my dad's office or, if my dad was home, hand him the phone and just watch him help people. And then, of course, tagging along with him at different events, ribbon cuttings and parades, etc. And then I got involved, in my local community. I was coaching Little League. I was coaching youth hockey. I was involved in the Civic Association, on the crime watch groups. So I started to get involved and wanted to take my sort of commitment to community and commitment to city to a different level. And that's why I decided to run for Boston City Council at large and was elected and sworn in 2000. So but it really started at my home, at that kitchen table, watching my dad help people, and I got bit by the bug, and I've had it ever since.
Excellent. Let's shift gear. We know in Boston we have a big crisis of homeless. If you are elected, what is your plan to address the problem of homeless in the city of Boston?
Yeah, we do have a major homeless problem, particularly family homeless. We've had, I think, close to 5,000 Boston public school children are sort of listed as homeless. That is outrageous. We can and must do better. We've seen Boston almost be Manhattanized, where we're becoming the city of the very rich and the very poor. I'm going to continue to support programs. There's not sort of one solution or one panacea. It's going to be a collection of efforts. I'd like to see Boston have its own AMI, because what's affordable to you may be different what's affordable to someone else. So we need to find out what is truly affordable for Boston residents. And I think AMI, a Boston AMI, right now our AMI, which is the area medium income, we're lumped in, it's possible, we're lumped in with suburban and sort of Metro West communities. That's not reflective of what's happening in our city as well as it pertains to our residents. I led the efforts to increase the linkage formula, not only when I first got elected, but I continue to work to increase that, to create money for affordable housing and for job creation. As important it is to have a roof over your house, over your head, you also need to have a good quality, high-paying job, or at least a sustainable wage to make sure you can afford the rents that you're seeing. Looking at programs like the One Plus Mortgage Program, looking at working with the Department of Neighborhood Development. I also chair CPA, Community Preservation Act, which to date has brought in $100 million, $50 million of which has gone to the creation of affordable housing. So again, identifying what is truly affordable to residents in the city, I think, is critical, and we can work towards maybe driving those numbers down. But homelessness is a problem, and again, as a reference, when you list 5,000 Boston Public School kids and they say that they're homeless, that's a huge problem. They're whether living in a shelter or they're couch surfing on a relative, or in some instances they may be in a car. Unacceptable in 2021 in Boston. And I was born in public housing. Not a lot of folks realize that. I was born in the old Harbor Projects, which is now the Mary Ellen McCormick. So I pay particularly close attention to our public housing stock and our residents. The federal government has sort of walked away from public housing. We have seen some great public-private partnerships that have helped not only restore a higher quality of living to public housing, but they've also increased the number of units through those public-private partnerships. And I want to make sure that those continue, because those are our most vulnerable residents. If you're in public housing, we're talking about folks that really don't have a lot of resources, if any at all. And so we need to pay particularly close attention, and that is a lot of our young families. It's also our seniors, and it's our veterans who have given and sacrificed for our country. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work in front of us. We continue to make strides, but as our city grows, and as more CEOs move their companies here, and more jobs are coming online, we need to make sure that those jobs that are good quality, high-paying jobs, that they also trickle out to our neighborhoods. And we need to prepare that workforce, and that requires us to put pressure on our Boston Public Schools to have a curriculum that matches the economy, that matches these jobs that are coming online. It could be in STEM, it could be in with life sciences and pharmaceuticals, it could be in healthcare, it could be in financial services. We need to identify those areas and then take that and the demands on the labor force and bring them to our Boston Public Schools and train and educate the next generation. So it's all sort of, they're all interrelated, with sort of housing and homelessness ties into sort of job creation, sustainable wages, and also when we're inviting companies to come here, we want that workforce to come from the neighborhoods of Boston.
What long-term permanent solutions do you have to address housing instability? In the city of Boston, now we have a new influx of federal funding. What will you do for that?
So obviously we're going to have over $400 million is coming in from the COVID relief funds. I will be serving, I'm wearing two hats here. I'm serving as the Boston City Council's chair of the COVID relief fund, so I will have a front row seat. I was also asked by the acting administration to serve on her task force on COVID relief funds. So working with a large and diverse group of residents to identify those critical needs. It could be people, it could be communities, it could be entities that have been hit the hardest and arguably in many instances devastated through COVID. And then obviously on the council we're going to have a series of public hearings to also help identify where those areas are and how can we get these precious funds to them. Clearly housing, affordable housing is a critical piece of that, and making sure that whether it's using through D&D, Department of Neighborhood Development, and or our CDCs, Community Development Corporations, creating affordable housing there, putting pressure on developers to do their fair share as they're doing and getting their projects permitted, making sure that they're increasing to the best of their ability and their pro formas include more affordable housing opportunities, and thinking creatively around SROs, single room occupancies, protecting expiring use properties, which I've led the effort on, creating more of those public-private partnerships for our public housing, increasing the linkage formula, increasing IDP, all of those things. It's sort of a multitude of different things and programs and policies that we need to continue to work to make sure that we're trying to do the best to reduce and eliminate homelessness first and foremost, but creating more affordable housing so people can stay in the city. What good is it that our city's thriving? What good is it if we boast the best colleges, universities, and hospitals in the world? What good is it if we have lots of great things happen in our community, but the people who have actually made our neighborhoods the great communities and neighborhoods that they are can no longer afford to live here? It's an absolute travesty. We need to stop that, and we need to make sure that we're protecting residents.
How would you stop that?
It's going to be these programs. It's going to be putting a significant amount of money behind it. It's going to be extracting more benefits from community benefits and housing benefits from our developers. It's going to be leaning on those public-private partnerships, and it's also going to be talking about working with our federal government, not just through the COVID relief funds, but have a more sustainable approach and a deeper commitment to public housing.
Okay, let's talk about the Green New Deal.
Sure.
Climate change, it's making headlines, all the media talking about how to create green jobs for Boston residents once you are elected.
Sure, and that's the thing that everyone's talking about now.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a responsibility to leave, our city, our state, our country, our world in a better place than how we found it, and that's for the next generations. It's clear, and the science is clear that we need to make some adjustments. So we're looking at obviously making sure that we, as a city, and I'll speak just for Boston as a citywide council, that we're doing our part. Whether it's eliminating fossil fuels, whether it's the vehicles, city vehicles, whether it's our buildings. A lot of folks realize this, but in City Hall, my office, for example, is a perfect example. The lights do not go off. So you can flip as many switches as you want off. There is a steady stream of lights in City Hall that do not shut off. I don't even know if anyone even knows where the switch is. You know when it's off, when the light bulb runs out. Okay. So it's things like that. So I've led efforts on greening City Hall. I've led efforts on greening city buildings, and it needs to be sort of it's a twofold effort. We need to make a commitment to doing better and to eliminating things that are going to destroy obviously the ozone. But we also need to prepare folks to fill those green jobs, if you want, those green tech jobs, and that starts obviously with maybe a better voc tech, and that could be a great opportunity for Madison Park. Have a great, have a state-of-the-art sort of green technology voc tech in the city of Boston to train that next generation for those jobs. But we have a responsibility to protect our environment, and we need to make sure that we're doing our part in terms of how we're running the city, how we're running our buildings, how we're running our vehicles, and by doing that, hopefully that, and also encouraging the public to do the same, and those could be now private projects, those could be institutional expansion, put pressure on those entities when they're looking at expanding, when they're looking at building new buildings, when they're looking at retrofitting their existing building to reduce the carbon footprint, that they're leaning on a workforce that comes from the neighborhoods of Boston that's trained through our Boston Public Schools.
Do you have a list of any areas you believe the city of Boston could improve upon if you get elected?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've touched on housing. We've also talked about COVID relief. I wanted a little focus
about security.
Public safety is always a big part. Public safety. One of the reasons people come here, and one of the reasons that people bring their children here to get a great education, and why companies, CEOs are bringing their companies here is because we are a relatively safe city, particularly for our size or bigger. So public safety is always going to be key. People need to feel safe in their community. They need to make sure that their children are safe. They need to make sure that their parents are safe. So, we need to continue to work with our police, our fire, our EMS. Are we perfect? Nope, we're not, but we arguably have one of the best police departments in the country. Our community policing model is the envy around the country. I get calls regularly from folks wanting to learn about our community policing model, to try to get an appointment with our commissioner and our chief, all because what we have works for Boston. Again, it's not perfect. We can always demand more transparency, but at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of what we're seeing play out in other cities. Most recently, I've seen, the mayors in Seattle, the mayor in Portland, Oregon, the mayor in DC, are now asking to hire more police officers after having defunded them like that, which was sort of a haphazard response to what was happening. So we're blessed to have a well-trained and experienced police department. We've got great captains, we've got great leadership, we've got a diverse command staff, and our community policing model is great. Are we perfect? By no means not. There's no perfect elected official. There's no sort of TV analyst and interviewer. There's also no perfect cop. But at the end of the day, I think we have a responsibility to work together to continue to make those improvements to move us forward. But I would also argue on education. We boast of the best college universities, as I mentioned. We're not so boastful about all of our public schools. We talk about our exam schools, we talk about this school, that school. And so if we're talking about the economy, if we're talking about closing the wealth gap, if we're talking about closing the achievement gap, if we're talking about closing the opportunity gap, it all starts with our Boston Public Schools. And we need to have a curriculum that matches that workforce and that economy. We need to make sure that our kids go on to these great schools. So Boston is home to some of the best colleges and universities in the world, but yet not enough of our kids, not enough of the kids that go to the Boston Public Schools get into these schools. Another travesty. There needs to be a direct pipeline. I created a thing called Year 13, It's a one-year intense program for Boston Public School students to do an additional year of college prep work, get their SAT scores up, learn a little bit more about STEM, and to partner with some of our local institutions in an effort to give them some exposure, because what we were learning was that our kids are either graduating from school, high school, and many of them first generation, graduating from high school, not going on to college, or they went on to college and then they hit a wall, and some of them were home before Thanksgiving. And some of it was subject matter acumen. So we have a responsibility to take those kids who are serious about going to college, give them that 1 year of intense college prep and exposure to colleges, and to make sure that and help them get those SATs and get
The
those.
producer is telling me it's 1 minute left.
great.
I'm going to ask you 2 questions. You're going to have 30 seconds to answer each of them. What would you do, because we see the Delta variant? It's going far now. People are getting infected. The CDC doing mass mandate for high school for student and high school. What would you plan to be safely European or BPS school in September 2021?
What's the plan to have it safely open?
Yeah.
So obviously the administration, the acting administration right now is asking that all students and teachers be masked. If I could use the opportunity to encourage folks to get vaccinated, for those that have not been vaccinated, to try to do that. For those that have been vaccinated and have gotten exposure to COVID, they don't seem to be getting as sick as they were the last time. There's less hospitalizations, and there's less need for intubation and/or for what was it? They were putting folks on the ventilators. So I would encourage that. I would encourage people to stay safe, to continue to hand sanitize, and to look after their loved ones. Make sure that they're taking the necessary precautions, doing the social distancing. Our hope is that it won't boomerang. There was a concern that this could happen. We are starting to see it in some other countries. Let's hope it doesn't happen here. We do not want to go back to shutdown. It was devastating for a lot of our communities, particularly for our small local businesses. And our hope is that that's not the case. So let's continue to remain safe, and let's continue to work together.
Why my community, the Asian American in Boston, should vote for you again?
Sure, I have a great relationship with the Haitian community in Boston, and have many, many years. I actually was the very first city councilor to host the reception for the Haitian flag raising at City Hall. And then that became a tradition, not only for the Haitian community, but we started to do the reception at the flag raisings every year at the Boston City Council. And so I'm proud to have stood with our Haitian community. You guys have had some great leaders. I worked very closely with Linda Docina-Fori. I've worked very closely with Marie St. Fleur early on. Dr. Eno Mondesir was sort of an old friend. So many folks from the Haitian community have been very helpful to me over the years. So it's always been a two-way street. I enjoy the community. I look forward to gaining that community support, your community support again. And they won't be disappointed because they know me. They don't have to go looking for me. I don't go duck, dodge, and hide. They call me if there's something that I need to be at. I am there, and they're always welcome down at City Hall and in my office, as demonstrated with the great love and affection that I have. And to the Haitian community, I always give them thanks for their great contributions to our city. One of Boston's strengths is its diversity. The Haitian community in particular has led the effort with respect to that diversity. And you look all across our city in different sectors, there are Haitian folks and Haitian leaders in all of that. And it's a testament to the community, a resilient community, very respectful and appreciative of the opportunity that they had in this country. And then any time that we've had those partnerships, went back to Haiti, and there's been some tragedies in Haiti, and I've always participated along with the community to make sure that we're getting as many resources back to your homeland as necessary to deal with those crises, whether it was a weather-related or a sort of hurricane / earthquake type of thing, or any other type of humanitarian effort. I have always been and stood with your leaders in an effort to make sure that we're helping as best we can.
Thank you, Councillor Michael Flaherty. The road to the election, the local election in Boston, will be bumpy. The only thing you have to do, sit back and watch the bell top. We'll get you the information. My name is Elich Dorelas.
And vote.
And vote. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.